4. James G. Carter. An engine to sway the people. James G. Carter, 1795 to 1849, shared with Mann the leadership in Massachusetts of the movement for state control and support of the common schools. Carter was influential in securing passage of enabling legislation and established at Lancaster, Massachusetts in 1827 one of the earliest normal schools, a private institution. An earnest and dedicated man, Carter was concerned not only with state support and control of schools, but also with improved methods of instruction in the various subjects. His specific ideas in this regard are not our immediate concern, except that they indicate not a mere enthusiast, of whom there were many at this period, but a practical educator. The Constitution of Massachusetts of 1780 had expressed that state's interest in education. Wisdom and knowledge, as well as virtue, diffused generally among the body of the people, become necessary for the preservation of their rights and liberties, and as these depends on spreading the opportunities and advantages of education in the various parts of the country, it shall be the duty of legislatures and magistrates in all future periods of this Commonwealth to cherish the interests of literature and the sciences, and all seminaries of them, especially the University at Cambridge, public schools and grammar schools in the towns. The development of this interest into legislative provisions was Carter's work, together with Mann's. The congressional provision of land for school use was seen by Carter as an important step towards the self-preservation of the Union, and he saw education itself as the basic and perhaps only means of preserving the state. As the first object in the formation of every government is to provide for its own preservation, and as the general diffusion of knowledge and virtue is the most effectual, if not the only means of ensuring stability to republican institutions, the policy of the liberal appropriations made by Congress for education in every new state they incorporate is undoubtedly an enlightened policy and worthy of an enlightened and free government. Education meant an enlightened people without which free institutions cannot survive. The only question as to the permanency of free institutions is the educational one. Can the whole population be kept so well educated as the existence of such institutions suppose and require? An educated electorate was, for Carter, a preventative against revolution and a dictatorship. While the burden of taxation for state-supported schools would fall upon the rich, they too would reap a benefit through an educated lower class, which would now no longer be impatient of the influence and authority which property naturally confers. The rich would profit from the improved condition of society and the increased security of their property. This argument was not infrequently invoked in favour of state education. It would be a mistake, although not an uncommon one, to see this as a capitalistic device of exploitation. First, it was coupled with a sincere desire to advance the general welfare, and the proponents were earnest humanists. Second, although it was never associated with the name of welfare economy, it was nonetheless essentially identical with it. Whether it be agriculture, labour, or business, whenever and wherever a government exists to serve as the instrument of class welfare or general welfare rather than impartial justice, it is not a free economy, and it is a welfare state. Through tariffs, special legislation, subsidies, and other means from very early years, both business and agriculture were recipients of extensive welfare legislation. The New Deal increased rather than introduced this welfare legislation and gave a new primacy to labour. The 10th point of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto was a demand for state schools. 10. Free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labour in its present form, combination of education with industrial production, etc., etc. Marx, no less than Carter, saw education as a means whereby the managers of the state could control society. For Marx, factory labour was to be abolished only in its present form and a state-controlled relationship of education and industry affected. For Carter, no less, the school was an instrument of social control, and he quoted with approval Webster's statement, "We regard it as a wise and liberal system of police by which property and life and the peace of society are secured." Early socialists and latter-day mercantilists and interventionists were united in the battle for state-controlled education as a means of social control. The uncontrolled mind was a dangerous mind. Marx, in the Communist Manifesto, praised the bourgeoisie for creating enormous cities and thus having rescued a considerable part of the population from the idiocy of rural life. He was not alone in his contempt of the isolated and hence uncontrolled farmer. Marx further declared in that same document, "The communists have not invented the intervention of society in education. They do but seek to alter the character of that intervention and to rescue education from the influence of the ruling class." For Carter, this intervention, while a great police power, had as its noble goal the reformation of the body politic. The, quote, "free schools are the foundation not only of our whole system of public instruction, but of all our free institutions. Let our rulers take care, then, that this basis be not allowed to crumble away on any pretence. If it do so, there will be a wrenching in the political fabric and impending ruin." End quote. Moreover, Carter believed that he had a democratic concept of control. But who shall reform the theory and the practice of our discipline for the young so as to make its influence the greatest and the best upon individuals and upon the public? All, every member of the community. By this, however, he meant social influences rather than actual government of education, so that the direct control of education by the parents was exchanged for a broader and general education by influence and example. This surrender of education to the states would result in the great benefit of levelling classes regularly and a removal of the fear that a monopoly of talent, of industry, and consequently of acquirements would follow a monopoly of property. This principle, never likely to be fully in operation, would nevertheless further the continual development of a new and natural aristocracy of distinction. Its tendency, however, is not to level by debasing the exalted, but by exalting the debased, and it is a more effectual check against an aristocracy of wealth and consequently of political influence than would be a national jubilee and the equal distribution of property, once in 50 years without such a principle at the foundation of our system of public instruction. "Knowledge is power," says Lord Bacon, and so is property power, because it will procure knowledge. If we suppose society divided into two classes, the rich and the poor, the property of the former class, if there were no such institution as the free schools, would procure such immense advantages of education as to bring second, third, and any rate talents into successful competition with those of the first order without such advantages. Thus, while Carter saw state schools as a police power and a means to social control, it was not merely to perpetuate class control, but to create a constantly new aristocracy and controlling power with free opportunity provided to the poor for advancement. Ability was to be given priority over property, and men of ability given an opportunity thereby to gain property. The U.S. Review quoted the foregoing passage and 2 other paragraphs with approval and urged the support of state schools on the rich. It is a tax, however, which they ought and which they are generally willing to pay because, like every other judicious tax, it strengthens good government and thus secures to them the enjoyment of their property, which otherwise might be in danger of violation or encroachment. 2 facts appear clearly among others. 1. The rich were generally willing to pay, that is, in favour of state education. 2. And they saw it as conducive to social order. The sympathies of merchants were predominantly anti-Calvinist and pro-Unitarian, and hence by no means conservative. They were often not of the colonial aristocracy, and hence were ready to see the old order challenged. Without their readiness to tax themselves, the state support of education would have failed. A third factor was, however, the basic influence in the adoption of state support. The utopian hopes engendered by the new thought of the day found their focus in education as the means to paradise regained. There were hints of that glorious future. Bacon has thrown forward an anchor with which the world has not yet come up. Bacon's philosophical and scientific method was thus already an anchor in that future world, and the ship of state, by means of state education, must be pulled forward into that future when locks and bars will be unnecessary, and, in Webster's phrase, man will have a security beyond the law and above the law in the prevalence of enlightened and well-principled moral sentiments. The results, as Carter saw them, were glorious. The whole earth will then constitute but one beautiful temple in which may dwell in peace all mankind, and their lives form but one consistent and perpetual worship. Carter did not say whether it was God or education which was to be so worshipped. Before this could be done, the state must also train the teachers. Teachers' training he saw as the great engine of social control. An institution for the education of teachers, as has been before intimated, would form a part, and a very important part, of the free school system. It would be, moreover, precisely that portion of the system which should be under the direction of the state, whether the others are or not. Because we should thus secure at once an uniform, intelligent and independent tribunal for decisions on the qualifications of teachers, because we should thus relieve the clergy of an invidious task, and ensure to the public competent teachers, if such could be found or prepared. An institution for this purpose would become, by its influence on society, and particularly on the young, an engine to sway the public sentiment, the public morals, and the public religion, more powerful than any other in the possession of government. It should therefore be responsible immediately to them, and they should carefully overlook it and prevent its being perverted to other purposes, directly or indirectly, than those for which it is designed. It should be emphatically the state's institution, and its results would soon make it the state's favourite and pride among other literary and scientific institutions. The legislature of the states should therefore establish and build it up without waiting for individuals at great private sacrifices to accomplish the work. Such would be the influence of an institution for the education of teachers, and such is the growing conviction of the strength of early associations and habits that it cannot be long before the work will be begun in some form. If it be not undertaken by the public and for public purposes, it will be undertaken by individuals for private purposes. In this amazing statement, it is clear that Carter, at one and the same time, saw the potential power of total social control through controlled teachers, and yet believed that this engine, if controlled by the state, would be both intelligent and independent. Carter was ready to see the schools remain private if necessary, if only teachers could be controlled, and yet he could believe that such a control could produce an independent, spirited education. How did he reconcile total control and freedom? The answer is simplicity itself. The state, like God, was beyond suspicion. It was the vehicle of social salvation and the order of that redeemed life, and the state school was its handmaiden. True order and true liberty were synonymous with the triumph of the American states and the Federal Union, the desired vessels of redemption. The church was viewed with suspicion, but not the state. This refusal to be suspicious of the state in America led to a readiness to examine and adopt practices of European state-controlled education, while frankly acknowledging their use by despots. The Ohio legislature actually requested Calvin E. Stowe, husband of Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, to study European state schools as a guide to education in Ohio. The colonies had rebelled against the omnipotence of Parliament. A new doctrine, the omnipotent rights of man, had arisen. Those rights were now identified increasingly with the state. Popular sovereignty conferring an omnipotence upon the state and making it thereby the true realm of rights and of human fulfillment. James Carter was instrumental in creating a mighty engine to sway the people. It was not to go unused, and a century later, the implications of its potentialities became a major issue as men began to use that engine to recreate society with dedication and zeal.